The lights died mid-sentence. I was sitting in my workshop, soldering the final connection on a solar battery controller I'd been building, when the hum of electricity vanished. My tools, my laptop, my ceiling fan, all silent. Outside, the neighbor's sprinklers hissed to a stop. For a second, I thought it was a local outage. Then I saw her. Karen, the HOA president, standing on my property line with a smug, arms-folded stance and a pair of bright orange bolt cutters dangling from her hand. That was the exact moment I knew things had crossed from irritating to personal. She didn't flinch when I walked outside. She just smirked and said, "Your unsanctioned power line was an eyesore. The board voted to have it removed." I pointed to the cut cable coiled at her feet. "That's not an eyesore. That's the connection to my workshop, and you just destroyed private property." Karen shrugged. "Then maybe next time you'll submit the proper paperwork before running electrical lines through common soil." She said it like she was doing me a favor, as though she'd just freed the community from a great evil. For months she'd been on a crusade, first about the color of my mailbox, then the improper gravel texture of my driveway. She thrived on control. I'd played along until now, quietly fixing whatever she complained about. But cutting power? That crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I called the county inspector that same afternoon. He confirmed what I already knew. My setup was fully compliant, the line permitted and buried legally. He even offered to file a report for property damage. But Karen was clever. She'd claimed it was a community hazard, citing the HOA's vague bylaw about visible utilities affecting neighborhood harmony. Bureaucracy would drag this for weeks. That night, sitting in the dark workshop, I decided I wasn't going to wait. I spent hours researching backup solutions until I landed on a monster of an idea, a 15-kilowatt diesel generator, industrial grade, loud enough to be heard from half a block away. When the delivery truck arrived 2 days later, Karen nearly combusted. She stormed out in her robe, hair in curlers, clutching a clipboard. "What is that?" "Backup power," I said, lifting the tarp with deliberate calm. The steel frame gleamed under the morning sun. "That's not allowed," she barked. "Noise ordinances, Section 14, Subsection 3. "Don't worry," I replied. "It's within county limits, and perfectly legal under emergency power regulations. You know, since someone destroyed my main line." She blanched but didn't respond. Instead, she called an emergency HOA meeting that evening. I attended, of course, just to watch the show. The board members looked exhausted. Most of them were reasonable people trapped under her rule. She opened with her usual flair. "This generator poses an unacceptable disturbance to our peaceful community." I leaned forward. "Unacceptable disturbance? You mean the sound of reliable electricity?" She shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "You're violating community harmony." Karen, one of the other board members, sighed. "He's within code. Maybe we should focus on the bigger issues, like the drainage complaint." Karen slammed her folder shut. "Fine. But when the residents complain, don't say I didn't warn you." The first night I fired it up, the roar rolled across the cul-de-sac like thunder. My workshop lights flickered back to life, tools humming again. Across the street, Karen's windows vibrated faintly. I could see her curtains twitch. She peeked out, phone in hand, probably drafting another complaint. By the third night, she tried the police. 2 officers came by, both polite but visibly amused. I showed them my permits, decibel readings, and the county's letter approving temporary use. They nodded, thanked me, and drove off. Karen, standing a few feet away in her bathrobe, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. That should have been the end of it, but Karen didn't believe in losing quietly. The next morning, I found a note taped to my mailbox. "The HOA will fine you $500 per day for noncompliance." I laughed out loud. She didn't have the authority to issue fines without a vote, but that didn't stop her. She wanted to rattle me. I decided to let her dig her own hole. Over the next week, I upgraded the generator's housing with a reinforced frame and vibration pads, purely out of courtesy for the neighbors. But I also added a secondary exhaust system that redirected heat away from my garage. Every time it rumbled to life, Karen's decorative wind chimes clanged like a metallic tantrum. Then came the cherry on top. A local news van showed up one morning. Apparently, someone had tipped them off about a resident using industrial machinery in a suburban neighborhood. The reporter, bright-eyed and eager, asked for an interview. I gave her the full story, complete with the detail about the HOA president cutting my legally installed line. Karen tried to interrupt the interview, yelling about community reputation and unauthorized media presence. The camera caught every second. By evening, the segment aired under the headline, HOA Power Struggle, Resident Fights Back After Line Cut. The online comments were brutal. People called her the voltage vigilante, mocking her obsession with control. Some even showed up at the next HOA meeting just to watch her flounder. She tried to threaten legal action, but the footage of her with bolt cutters made that impossible. I thought the humiliation might humble her, but Karen doubled down. She started filing noise complaints daily, calling the city inspector, even claiming diesel fumes were affecting her sleep. I kept every notice neatly in a folder labeled Future Lawsuit. Late one night, I heard her outside again, whispering to someone near the generator fence. I flicked on the floodlights. 2 teenage boys, probably her nephews, froze mid-step, a wrench in one hand and a camera in the other. Evening, I said. Careful, that fence is electrified when the generator's running. They bolted. Karen's porch light clicked off a moment later. The next day, I installed motion-activated cameras and a small sign, "Smile, you're live." The escalation had reached its peak. Or so I thought. A week later, I received a letter from the county attorney's office. Karen had filed a nuisance claim, alleging my generator caused vibrational distress to her property. The phrase alone made me laugh, but the court date was real. She'd actually taken it that far. I didn't panic. I gathered every inspection report, every permit, every noise measurement, even her texts and emails. When the day came, she strutted into court in a pastel suit, eyes burning with determination. The judge listened patiently to her tirade about community balance and sleep deprivation. Then he turned to me. I handed over the evidence packet, complete with a certified copy of the news clip. His verdict was short and brutal. The defendant's generator operation is lawful. The plaintiff's destruction of private property constitutes vandalism. Case dismissed. Karen's jaw dropped. Mine didn't move. I just nodded and walked out. That night, I ran the generator one last time, purely for maintenance. The deep, rhythmic hum rolled across the street, steady and powerful. I stood outside watching her lights flicker, her curtains drawn tight. She'd lost. And in that vibrating moment, as the engine purred like justice itself, I realized something. Sometimes peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from the steady sound of consequences. The morning after the court ruling, I woke up to the faint smell of diesel and the most satisfying quiet I'd experienced in weeks. Not because the generator was off, but because Karen was. No phone calls, no angry notes, no threats taped to my garage door. Just silence. It was suspiciously calm, like the kind of silence a cat makes before it pounces. I knew her too well by now to think she'd actually given up. Karen didn't know how to surrender. She only knew how to scheme. By noon, the HOA group chat started pinging. Karen had posted a community alert about toxic emissions from unauthorized mechanical installations. Her message came with a blurry zoomed-in photo of my generator's exhaust pipe, taken from what looked like her upstairs bathroom window. The caption read, "Notice the black residue, clear evidence of pollution." I almost spit out my coffee. The generator had a state-certified low-emission system. But her accusation caught traction fast, because people love drama more than truth. A few neighbors started asking questions, politely at first. One even knocked on my door, a middle-aged dad from down the street who looked genuinely concerned. Hey man, Karen's saying your generator's leaking fumes toward her house. My wife's pregnant, so I just wanted to check. I invited him in and showed him the emission certificate, signed and stamped by the county environmental office. Then I walked him to the generator itself, fired it up, and pointed out the clean exhaust. No smoke, no smell, nothing but a steady hum. He nodded slowly. Huh. She's kind of exaggerating then. That's her favorite sport, I said. He laughed, shook my hand, and left. A few hours later, Karen posted another message. Certain residents are trying to manipulate others with fake documents. The HOA will conduct its own environmental inspection. By the HOA, she meant herself. Sure enough, the next afternoon she showed up in a neon safety vest, clipboard in hand, and a cheap handheld air quality meter she probably bought off Amazon. She stood at my property line like some self-appointed EPA agent, waving the device around dramatically. When I walked out to say hello, she didn't even look at me. Just routine testing, she said, scribbling random numbers on her clipboard. Need an extension cord? I asked. Or are you running that thing on the same power you cut last week? She ignored me and moved closer to the generator. I could practically see her trying to provoke a reaction, hoping I'd snap and give her something to use against me. I just stood there, calm, hands in pockets, watching her chase invisible toxins. When she finally stormed off muttering about evidence collection, I smiled. That night, I sent an email to the HOA board, minus Karen. Subject line: regarding unauthorized inspections. I attached photos of her on my property line and quoted the HOA bylaws she was violating, ironically, the same ones she'd used to fine me for unsanctioned modifications. I ended with a simple line: I trust the board will handle this internally. The next day, one of the quieter board members, Linda, called me privately. She was fed up. We can't keep dealing with her power trips, she said. Half the community's afraid of her, the other half wants to move. So why not vote her out? I asked. Linda sighed. She's been here 15 years. She knows everyone's secrets. Late dues, unapproved remodels, all of it. People won't cross her. That was my opening. Then maybe they just need to see what she's really like when someone stands up to her. Linda paused. You're planning something, aren't you? Let's call it a demonstration of transparency. Over the next few days, I set up a few discreet outdoor cameras, not for defense this time, but for documentation. I positioned them to catch the generator area, my driveway, and the edge of Karen's property. I'd already caught her nephews once, and I wasn't about to let her pull another stunt. On Friday evening, as if on cue, Karen made her move. I was inside fixing dinner when the motion alert pinged on my phone. I opened the feed and saw her sneaking across the lawn in a hoodie, carrying a plastic jug. She crouched near the generator's vent. I didn't even need to zoom in to guess what was happening. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped outside, and flipped it on. The beam hit her dead in the face. She froze like a raccoon in a spotlight. Evening, Karen, I said. Refilling my fuel tank for me? She stammered, clutching the jug. I was taking a sample for the environmental report. I said, pointing to the camera above her head. Funny, because that looks like a gallon of vinegar. Planning to corrode the metal? That's property damage again. Her face twisted. You're harassing me with that thing. Constant noise, fumes, everyone hates it. Everyone except the court, the county, and the laws of physics, I said dryly. But you keep trying. You're very dedicated. She dropped the jug and stormed off, hissing something about civil suits and community preservation. I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. The footage spoke for itself. The next morning, I sent the video to the entire HOA board, along with a polite note. In case you're wondering why she's collecting vinegar samples at midnight. Within hours, I got an email from Linda. Emergency meeting tomorrow. Bring your documentation. When I showed up, the energy in the room was electric. Karen sat at the head of the table, pretending nothing was wrong, but her fingers were drumming nervously. I waited for the right moment, then slid a USB drive across the table. The screen behind us flickered to life, showing the video of her sneaking into my yard. Gasps filled the room. One of the older members shook his head. "Karen, what the hell were you thinking?" She tried to spin it, of course. "That footage is taken out of context. I was verifying a violation for the community's safety." Linda cut her off. "By pouring something into his generator? That's criminal mischief." The vote to remove her from the presidency wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive enough. She was stripped of her role, pending investigation. I thought that would finally end it. But Karen wasn't done. If she couldn't control the HOA, she'd control the narrative. 2 days later, she started a private Facebook group called Save Maplewood Estates, claiming she was a victim of harassment and digital surveillance. She posted the court documents, the generator photo, and even a cropped still of me standing outside, flashlight in hand, accusing me of stalking her property. Her followers, mostly other HOAs across the country, ate it up. Then things got weird. I started receiving letters, actual physical letters, from strangers telling me I was ruining the neighborhood's soul. One even included a Bible verse and a hand-drawn sketch of my house. That's when I realized Karen had weaponized the internet. So I fought back the only way she'd never expect: facts and kindness. I created my own public post on the community forum. No insults, no mockery, just a straightforward summary of events, complete with timestamps, photos, and inspection reports. I didn't mention her name once, but everyone knew. The post blew up. Residents who'd stayed silent began commenting. Stories about Karen trespassing, issuing fake fines, even spying through windows. Within hours, the HOA inbox overflowed with complaints. The board had to schedule another emergency vote, not about me this time, but about dissolving the HOA entirely. Karen tried to stop it, but her credibility was gone. People she'd bullied for years finally spoke up. The retired couple she'd fined for painting their shutters blue. The single mom she'd threatened over a kiddie pool. The landscaper she'd screamed at for parking too long. All of them came forward. The final vote was historic, 23-2 in favor of disbanding the HOA. When the decision was read aloud, Karen stood up, trembling with fury. "You're all making a mistake. Without me, this neighborhood will fall apart." Linda replied, calm and cool, "Maybe it'll finally breathe." Karen stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the blinds. Afterward, neighbors I'd barely spoken to stopped by to thank me. One brought pie. Another offered to help soundproof the generator shed. The irony was that the thing Karen hated most had brought everyone else together. That night, I turned the generator on for one last symbolic run. Its low, steady rumble filled the air, not angry, not defiant, just alive. Across the street, Karen's house sat dark. She'd taken down her porch lights. I stood there a long time, watching the glow from my workshop windows stretch across the driveway. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was in a war zone. Just a neighborhood finally free from its self-appointed tyrant. Still, I knew better than to assume peace would last. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat. She'd find a new way to retaliate. She always did. But I was ready this time. Every cable buried deeper, every camera perfectly angled, every neighbor now aware of the truth. Because when someone cuts your power, you don't just turn the lights back on. You learn to keep them burning, no matter how loud it gets. It took about a week for the neighborhood to settle into its new rhythm. Without Karen's daily patrols, people started relaxing. Lawns grew a little freer, kids played basketball in the cul-de-sac again, and nobody was writing passive-aggressive notes about trash bins or mailbox height. It felt almost normal. But normal doesn't last long when someone like Karen's involved. I first noticed the black SUV parked near the end of the block on a Wednesday afternoon. It wasn't one of the usual residents, too new, too polished. Tinted windows, idling for long stretches, always facing my house. At first, I assumed it was a delivery driver taking a break. Then it showed up again the next day. Same time. Same spot. By Friday, curiosity got the better of me. I walked down the street, phone in hand, pretending to take a call. As I got closer, the driver lowered the window, just a few inches. A man in a collared shirt leaned out, flashing a polite smile. "Afternoon, sir. I'm with Maplewood Environmental Safety. We're conducting air quality checks in the area." "Environmental safety?" I said. "That's not a county department." He hesitated for half a second. "We're contracted privately." "By who?" He smiled again, thinner this time. "I'm not at liberty to say." Of course he wasn't. I thanked him, walked home, and immediately searched the name on his badge. Fake. The company didn't exist. Karen was back, and this time she'd upgraded her tactics. That night, I checked the generator logs and motion cameras. Sure enough, the SUV had stopped by again while I was out buying groceries. The passenger door opened, someone stepped onto the curb, then quickly returned. They hadn't touched anything, just lingered. Reconnaissance. The next morning, I found a new letter in my mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Karen's looping, self-important cursive. "You may have tricked the HOA and manipulated the media, but you can't manipulate the truth. This community deserves accountability. I will find it." No threats, no signatures, just that. It was the kind of vague menace that relied on imagination to do the heavy lifting. I filed it in my growing Karen Chronicles folder, right next to her fake fines and court filings. That weekend, I decided to get ahead of whatever she was planning. I invited the local sheriff's deputy, the same one who'd handled the original property damage case, over for coffee. Deputy Morales was one of those steady, unflappable types who'd seen everything twice. I showed him the SUV footage and the letter. He nodded slowly. "Legally, it's just harassment for now. No direct threats, no trespassing. But if she hires anyone to dig around your property, that's a different story." "You said she's not with the HOA anymore." "She's still pretending she is," I said. "Probably telling people she's conducting independent investigations." Morales sipped his coffee. "Keep recording everything. If she crosses the line again, we'll handle it." I appreciated his calmness. I also knew Karen wouldn't stop until she was publicly proven wrong, again. 2 days later, I got a knock on the door. This time it wasn't an SUV. It was a white van with airflow testing services painted on the side. 2 men in reflective vests stood there, holding clipboards. "We're here for the air quality inspection," one said. "Got a call from a homeowner about excessive diesel fumes." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the homeowner across the street?" He checked his notes. Yeah." I smiled. "You might want to read that fine print. My property's private, but if you'd like, I can show you the generator's emission certificate and invite you to take readings from the public sidewalk." They exchanged awkward glances but agreed. 10 minutes later, they handed me their report. Everything normal. 0 violations. I thanked them and offered bottled water before they left. The moment their van pulled away, I could see Karen's curtain twitching. That night, I uploaded the footage to my online folder labeled Documented Harassment. It was becoming my insurance policy. The calm lasted about 48 hours. Then came the drone. It buzzed in just after dusk, a small quadcopter, hovering low over my yard. At first I thought it was a kid messing around, until I saw the camera gimbal tilting, scanning, recording. I stepped outside, waved my hand, and it darted upward, disappearing over Karen's roofline. I walked straight to my computer and checked the local hobbyist drone laws. Flying over private property for surveillance was illegal without consent. She just gifted me another violation. The next day, I visited the county office and filed a harassment report with the footage attached. They promised to follow up. But I knew Karen, she'd find another loophole. She always did. By midweek, I found flyers taped to several mailboxes in the neighborhood. "Attention residents. Diesel generator pollutants detected near 214 Oak Ridge Lane. Possible long-term health risk. No name, of course, but the address was mine. Some neighbors ignored it, others didn't. That evening, I got 3 calls from worried residents. "We know you're not the problem," one woman said softly. "But she's scaring people again. We thought things were finally peaceful." That gave me an idea. If Karen wanted attention, I'd give it to her, but on my terms. The next weekend, I organized a community barbecue. The theme? Powering positivity. Everyone was invited. I even printed flyers. Good food, good neighbors, no bylaws. People showed up in droves, probably half the subdivision. Kids ran around with hot dogs, music played, and for the first time, laughter echoed across the street. Karen's curtains stayed shut. Halfway through, I gave a little impromptu speech. Nothing dramatic, just a few lines about resilience and standing up to pettiness. I thanked the neighbors for not letting noise drown out reason. Subtle, but pointed. As the sun went down, someone projected an outdoor movie on a white sheet, a documentary about small-town communities working together. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. But the best moment came right at the end. As people were packing up, my generator kicked in automatically. There'd been a brief power flicker. The machine roared to life, steady and sure, bathing the area in warm light. People cheered. Someone yelled, "Now that's reliability!" I glanced toward Karen's dark windows. For the first time in months, she didn't peek out. I should have felt victorious, but I knew better. Karen wasn't gone, she was regrouping. And I didn't have to wait long to find out how. 2 nights later, at exactly 2:17 a.m., my phone pinged with a motion alert. The feed showed a faint glow near the generator shed. Then, smoke. I bolted out of bed, grabbed the fire extinguisher, and sprinted outside. Someone had poured what looked like a line of lighter fluid along the ground near the generator housing. It hadn't caught fully, thank God, but the plastic edge of the vent had melted. I doused the flames before they spread. Adrenaline pounding, I reviewed the footage. There she was, Karen, moving fast, head down, hoodie up. She poured the fluid, struck a match, and ran. The camera caught her face for half a second as the flare lit up. Enough to identify her beyond any doubt. I didn't hesitate. I called Morales. He arrived 15 minutes later, still half-dressed, flashlight in hand. When he saw the footage, his jaw tightened. "That's arson. You're pressing charges." "Absolutely," I said. Karen was arrested the next morning. The neighborhood woke up to flashing lights and stunned silence. Her voice, sharp, shrill, echoed through the street as they led her to the patrol car. "You can't arrest me. I'm protecting my community." Morales didn't even look at her. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for attempted arson and destruction of property." The next few days were chaos. Reporters came back. The same station that covered the first story now ran a follow-up titled, "Former HOA President Arrested in Generator Fire Attempt." Karen made bail within 48 hours, of course. She always found a way. But this time, she didn't come home quietly. Her yard sprouted signs overnight: false charges, neighbor abuse, free speech is not a crime. It would have been funny if it wasn't so desperate. I focused on rebuilding. I replaced the damaged parts, reinforced the housing with steel plating, and added a new feature, a motion-triggered air horn. The next time anyone came within 5 feet uninvited, they'd get an earful loud enough to wake the county. And yet, a part of me wondered what kept her going. Was it pride? Control? Fear of being irrelevant? Karen didn't just hate losing, she feared being invisible. Without the HOA, without authority, she was just another neighbor. For her, that was worse than punishment. A week after her arrest, I got a letter from her lawyer threatening to sue me for defamation and emotional distress. I almost laughed. She'd set my property on fire and wanted sympathy. I sent a copy of her threat to Morales, who just replied, "Don't worry. Let the system work this time." I wasn't sure what system he meant, but something told me this battle wasn't over. Karen wasn't a wildfire, she was a slow, smoldering ember, always waiting for oxygen. And as I watched the generator purr softly under the stars that night, I realized the next phase wouldn't be about fire or noise. She'd try something smarter, quieter, and far more dangerous. The peace that followed Karen's arrest was the kind that makes you suspicious. Too quiet. Too still. Even the dogs in the neighborhood barked less, as if waiting for the next storm. I'd lived through her tantrums long enough to know that this wasn't over, this was her gathering breath. People like Karen don't stop, they just switch tactics. For the first few days, I convinced myself I could enjoy the calm. I worked in my shop again, fixed my motorcycle, even started sketching out plans for a new storage shed. But every time I looked toward her house across the street, shutters closed, porch lights off, the mailbox sagging like it hadn't been checked in days, I got that uneasy feeling you get when a spider disappears under the couch. Then, small things started happening. First, my trash can vanished. Not rolled down the street, gone. The next day, my mailbox flag was bent backward, like someone had tried to pry it open. On day 3, I found a smear of glue across my front gate latch. Petty, almost childish stuff. Too minor for the police, too deliberate to be coincidence. Karen was back in her comfort zone, plausible deniability. I set up another motion camera, low profile, this time disguised as a decorative solar light. By nightfall, I caught her on video walking her dog past my driveway, pausing just long enough to look toward the gate. The dog didn't move. She wasn't walking him, she was loitering. When the motion light kicked on, she jumped and yanked the leash, so hard the poor thing yelped. I sent the clip to Morales. He sighed. She's walking a fine line. Keep documenting. The prosecutor's office is building a harassment case, but we need her to cross it clearly. I didn't like waiting for her to make the next move, so I started preparing for it. The generator was secure, the cameras synced, and I'd added a second backup battery system inside the garage. Quiet, solar-fed, enough to keep the essentials running if she somehow managed to mess with the diesel setup again. I wasn't going to be caught in the dark twice. A week later, the next phase began, paper warfare. I came home one afternoon to find a manila envelope taped to my door. Inside were 10 pages of typed complaints filed with the county zoning office. All anonymous, all citing me as a nuisance property owner creating excessive vibration, air pollution, and public intimidation through surveillance equipment. It was almost poetic how she twisted the facts, everything she'd done to me, reworded as my offense. The last page was signed under an alias, but the phrasing was pure Karen. We, the concerned citizens of Maplewood Estates, demand immediate enforcement of community safety standards. I drove down to the zoning office the next morning. The clerk, an older woman with glasses sliding down her nose, recognized my name immediately. "Oh, you're the generator guy," she said with a half-smile. "We've already flagged these as duplicate. Looks like someone's submitting them from the same IP address. Don't worry, we're aware of her history." That gave me a bit of relief, but not for long. Because when Karen's schemes failed quietly, she always went louder. That Friday, I woke up to a strange sound, an engine idling right outside my fence. I stepped out onto the porch and froze. There, parked across my driveway, was a flatbed truck loaded with cinder blocks, sandbags, and wooden pallet. On the side of the truck was a logo, Safe Sound Environmental Barrier Solutions. And who stood beside it, clipboard in hand, but Karen herself, wearing a neon safety vest like she was running a construction site. "Morning," she called out too cheerfully. "We're installing a sound dampening wall. HOA regulation. Well, former HOA regulation, but the community voted to support it." I stared at her. "There is no community regulation. There is no HOA." She beamed. "Oh, I'm not building on your side. It's on mine. Entirely legal. And since your generator's so noisy, this will help everyone. A win-win." Sure enough, the truck driver shrugged apologetically and started unloading. I couldn't stop her, it was her property line. But as the wall took shape over the next 2 days, it became clear it wasn't about noise. She positioned it just close enough to block my driveway's sideline, turning my front yard into a shadowy dead zone after sunset. It was psychological warfare, and she was a master at it. Neighbors started whispering again. Some thought I'd reignited the feud, others tried to stay neutral. Only Linda and a few others knew the full story. She came over one evening, arms crossed. "She's trying to make you snap," Linda said. "If you lose your temper, she wins. She'll record it, spin it, and suddenly you're the problem." I nodded. "I know. That's why I'm not taking the bait." But inside I was boiling. When the wall was finally finished, it looked ridiculous. 6 feet tall, made of uneven blocks and plywood, painted a blotchy beige that didn't match anything around it. It cast an ugly shadow across my garden. Worse, it rattled whenever the generator kicked on, producing an echoing hum that amplified the noise instead of muffling it. That was the irony Karen didn't anticipate. Her sound barrier made everything louder. I decided to document the absurdity. I filmed a short video showing the vibration readings, the sound decibel meter, and the wall's effects. I uploaded it with a dry caption: "When your neighbor builds a sound barrier that violates physics." Within a day, it had over 200,000 views. The internet loved it. Comments poured in, calling her Cinderblock Karen and Queen of Decibels. By the next morning, news vans were back on the street. I didn't talk to them this time, but the sight alone sent Karen into a frenzy. She stood behind her wall, yelling at the reporters that they were trespassing on acoustic property. One of them caught it on camera. The segment aired that evening. Former HOA president's feud grows higher, literally. Karen's reputation was toast. But public embarrassment never stopped her. It only deepened her obsession. 2 nights later, she filed for a temporary restraining order, claiming I was stalking her through hidden cameras and weaponizing media coverage to induce public harassment. The judge denied it within 24 hours, citing lack of evidence. Still, it revealed something. She was unraveling. That's when she made her biggest mistake. A few days later, around 10 p.m., I got an alert from one of my side yard cameras. The footage showed Karen walking along the wall's edge with a cordless drill, unsteady on her feet, muttering to herself. She wasn't sabotaging this time, she was listening, pressing her ear against the plywood, then drilling tiny holes like she was searching for sound leaks. It would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. I called Morales, who arrived quietly and watched the footage with a weary look. "I'll send this to her probation officer," he said. "She's still under monitoring for the arson attempt. This could count as violation." The next day she was gone. Not arrested this time, just gone. A wellness check led to her being taken to a psychiatric evaluation facility for 72 hours. The police said she'd been found wandering the neighborhood barefoot, holding a decibel meter and shouting at streetlights. For the first time since I'd moved in, I felt a strange mix of victory and pity. She'd built her entire identity around control, and when she lost it, there was nothing left to hold her up. Over the next week, the neighborhood transformed completely. The cinder block wall came down. Apparently, it violated zoning after all. Neighbors pitched in to help me remove the debris, turning it into an impromptu block party. Kids climbed the last few slabs before they were hauled away. Someone even spray-painted "Peace at Last" across one of them. I thought that was the end of the story. Then, 3 nights later, a letter arrived. No return address, just a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. "Enjoy your power while it lasts." That was all it said. No signature. I stood there under the porch light, reading it over and over. My first instinct was to laugh, classic Karen, dramatic to the end. But a chill crept in. The wording was too deliberate. I checked my cameras again. Nothing new. Generator? Running perfectly. Fuel levels? Normal. The neighborhood? Silent. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The next phase wouldn't be about walls or noise. She'd been stripped of her tools, her titles, her control. That left only one weapon, revenge. And I had a sinking suspicion that this time, she wasn't planning to fight from across the street. She was planning to move much, much closer. The letter sat on my workbench all night, illuminated by the faint amber glow of the generator's shed light. I told myself it was just another empty threat, Karen's last gasp of control before she finally faded into irrelevance. But that phrase, "enjoy your power while it lasts," kept looping through my head. It wasn't her usual drama. It was colder, more deliberate. Like she'd planned something and wanted me to know I couldn't stop it. For the next few days, nothing happened. The neighborhood was still quiet, though a few residents started asking if I'd heard anything about Karen. Some said she'd been released early from her evaluation. Others whispered that she'd moved in with a sister across town. No one knew for sure, and I wasn't eager to find out. Still, I couldn't ignore the feeling that she was out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. I tried to keep busy. I replaced the generator's filters, cleaned the housing, ran diagnostics. Busy work, mostly. But on the fourth night, at around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a faint click. It wasn't the usual hum of the generator or the creak of the cooling pipe. It was sharper, metallic. I slipped out of bed, grabbed the flashlight, and checked the monitors. The feed from the driveway camera showed a shadow moving near the fence. Too small to be a person, maybe an animal? Then something glinted. I zoomed in. A wire, thin and stretched low, running from the edge of my generator fence to a box half hidden in the grass. My stomach dropped. I called Morales before I even went outside. He arrived 10 minutes later, still in plain clothes, eyes scanning the perimeter. I showed him the footage. "That's no animal," he said. "That's deliberate placement. You did the right thing staying inside." He called for backup. A patrol unit arrived and carefully approached the box. After a tense few minutes, the officer waved his hand. "Not explosive," he said, "but looks like a shorting device. Someone tried to rig your generator to blow its fuse and fry the control board." Karen. It had to be. Morales looked exhausted when he turned to me. "We'll dust for prints, but you already know who it'll point to. She's escalating again. This isn't just harassment anymore." They took the device for evidence and advised me to stay vigilant. I upgraded my perimeter alarms that very night, adding heat sensors and floodlights on a timed rotation. The place looked like Fort Knox by morning. 2 days later, a county inspector stopped by. Apparently, someone, anonymous of course, had reported me for illegal hazardous storage of diesel fuel. I showed him my compliance documents. He laughed and said, "I've already been here 3 times this year. Whoever's reporting you must think we're bored." "Not bored," I said. "Just vindictive." He nodded. "I'll note the false report." The next night, the power grid went down, citywide. A transformer failure knocked out half the county for several hours. For everyone else, it was chaos. For me, it was routine. I fired up the generator, and my house glowed like a beacon in a sea of darkness. 15 minutes later, someone pounded on my door. I opened it to find a crowd of neighbors, flashlights in hand, kids in pajamas, scared but smiling. "You've got power," one of them said. "Can we plug in a few essentials? Fridge, medical stuff?" "Of course," I said. "Run a few extension cords. Keep it reasonable." They lined up cords across the driveway, grateful and relieved. Within half an hour, my property looked like a lifeline hub, neighbors chatting, phones charging, the faint sound of laughter. For once, the generator was a symbol of unity, not conflict. Until she showed up. Karen's car, different this time, a dull gray sedan with temporary plates, rolled up slow, headlights off. She got out, thinner, paler, but with that same rigid posture. People froze. The street fell silent except for the generator's steady rumble. "So this is what you wanted," she said, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your little empire of noise. feeding off attention while everyone else suffers. "Good evening, Karen," I said evenly. "You're welcome to plug in like everyone else. Power's free tonight." She sneered. "You think this makes you a hero? You humiliated me. You destroyed my reputation. And now you're using that machine to rub it in." "Or maybe I'm just helping my neighbors," I said. Her eyes darted to the crowd, half of whom were filming. "You're all blind," she snapped. "He's manipulating you." "Karen, enough," Linda said from behind the group. "Just go home. Nobody wants another scene." Karen's face twisted. "Home? You took that from me. You voted me out. You ruined everything I built." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "And you? This all started because you refused to follow the rules." I kept my voice calm. "The rules stopped being rules when you used them to control people." Something in her expression cracked then, some flicker of pain beneath the anger. But it hardened again just as fast. She turned, got in her car, and sped off. Everyone exhaled at once. The tension dissolved slowly, replaced by murmurs of sympathy and disbelief. "She's lost it," someone whispered. "Completely gone." By morning, power was restored and life resumed. I thought maybe that confrontation would be the end of it. Maybe she'd finally exhausted her crusade. But that night, my cameras caught movement again. This time, not outside, inside. It was 11:47 p.m. The interior hallway motion sensor tripped, then the basement camera flicked on. I froze, staring at the screen. A figure was standing near the breaker panel, hooded, small, holding something metallic. I grabbed my phone and whispered to Morales. "She's in my house." "Stay put," he said immediately. "Lock yourself in a room. We're en route." But I wasn't the type to hide in my own home. I grabbed the flashlight and crept down the stairs. The basement light flickered as the generator kicked from idle to active mode, the hum deepening. The air smelled faintly of oil and static. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw her. Karen. Holding a wrench, her face half lit by the blinking indicator lights. Her eyes looked wild, unfocused. "Karen," I said quietly. "Put it down." She turned slowly. "You shouldn't have done this," she said. "You made me the villain. You made me small." "I didn't make you anything," I said. "You chose this. You cut my power, you destroyed property, you threatened people." "I was protecting the neighborhood," she shouted. "Someone had to. You were ruining everything. The peace, the order." "There was no peace," I said, taking a step closer. "You just called control peace. But they never feared me, Karen. They feared you." Her hand trembled. The wrench clattered to the floor. For a split second, I thought she might break down. Then she reached for the breaker switch. I lunged. We collided hard, knocking over a metal stool. The lights flickered again, and the generator roared in protest as if sensing the chaos. She tried to shove past me, yelling incoherently, but I caught her wrist. "Stop," I said. "You're only making this worse." Her voice cracked. "You don't understand. If I can't fix it, no one will." Then the basement door burst open. Morales and 2 officers flooded in, flashlights cutting through the dim light. They pulled her off me gently but firmly. She didn't fight. She just stared at the generator, eyes glazed, whispering something I couldn't quite catch. Morales helped me up. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, breathing hard. She was trying to shut it off. He nodded grimly. "She's done, this time. Breaking and entering, multiple restraining order violations. It's over." They led her out, handcuffed but silent. The whole street watched again as the patrol car pulled away, its red and blue lights washing over the neat suburban lawns she'd once ruled. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Not the uneasy kind, but real, solid quiet. The generator purred in the background like a heartbeat I'd learned to trust. Over the next few weeks, things returned to normal. The neighbors were kind. Someone even started a community rebuild group to help restore the spaces Karen had neglected. The HOA was officially dissolved, and for once, nobody missed it. I left the generator running every evening, not because I needed the power, but because its hum reminded me that order could exist without control. One morning, Morales stopped by with an update. "She's being transferred to a long-term facility," he said. "Court-ordered therapy and supervision. You won't be seeing her again." I nodded. "That's probably for the best." He looked at the generator, smiled faintly. "Funnier thing, though, every time I drive by here, that sound kind of comforts me now. Like the neighborhood's still alive." "Yeah," I said, glancing at the shed. "That's the idea." But that night, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, I noticed something odd. The lights from Karen's old house flicked on for the first time in weeks. No moving trucks, no car in the driveway, just a faint glow through the blinds. I stood there on my porch, listening to the steady hum of the generator, watching that single light burning across the street. Maybe someone new had moved in. Or maybe the house still remembered her. Either way, I knew one thing for sure. In Maplewood Estates, the lights were never going out again. When the light in Karen's old house first appeared, I didn't think much of it. It was just a lamp, soft, amber, steady. Probably a realtor prepping for showings, or maybe a distant relative finally deciding to claim the property. But over the next few nights, it stayed on. Always the same window, always the same time, from dusk until just after midnight, when it blinked out sharply, as if on a timer. By the fourth night, curiosity won out. I checked county records. No sale, no rental permit, no new listing. The property was still under Karen's name, though with a pending lien from the HOA dissolution and a court-ordered hold. In other words, nobody should have been inside. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was habit. After months of chaos, quiet felt unnatural. Still, the idea of that house, her house, glowing across the street like a ghostly reminder of everything that had happened, it didn't sit right. On the fifth night, around 10:30, I saw movement behind the curtains. Just a shadow. Quick, deliberate. My cameras didn't cover that angle anymore. I'd narrowed them back down to my own perimeter once she was institutionalized. That's what normal people do, right? They stop preparing for battles that are supposedly over. Except, apparently, it wasn't. I decided to walk over. Not confrontationally, just to check. I crossed the street quietly, hands in my jacket pockets, eyes on that glowing window. The front porch creaked when I stepped on it. Through the side glass panel of the door, I could see just the faintest flicker, like candlelight dancing on the wall. "Hello?" I called softly. No answer. I knocked once, twice. Silence. Then, faintly, a floorboard creaked upstairs. That's when my better judgment screamed to turn around. I obeyed. Mostly. I called Morales instead of going in. He promised to swing by when his shift ended, just to make sure no squatters had moved in. When he arrived half an hour later, the house was dark again. No light. No sound. He did a full perimeter check. Nothing broken, no footprints, no signs of entry. "Probably a motion timer," he said. "Old houses glitch like that. Power surges, faulty wiring, you know the drill." "Yeah," I said, trying to believe it. But deep down, I knew the rhythm of human presence. That wasn't random flickering, it was intentional. The next day, I decided to test a theory. I aimed one of my spare motion cameras discreetly toward her driveway, not to invade privacy, just to catch the front steps. If someone was coming or going, I'd see it. For 2 days, nothing. Then, on the third night, a vehicle appeared. Not Karen's gray sedan. This was an old blue van with its plates covered in duct tape. It idled for a moment, headlights off. Then the driver stepped out, a tall figure, hooded, moving with slow, careful steps. The person unlocked the door, entered, and the light flicked on again. I froze watching the feed. How did they have a key? I called Morales immediately. By the time he arrived with another unit, the van was gone. The door, however, was locked tight again. He shined his flashlight through the window. Inside, everything looked untouched, dusty furniture, unopened mail, even the faint outline of the "For Legal Hold" sticker still on the wall. Could be someone she hired before being taken in, Morales said. A relative, maybe. We'll track the van. But I couldn't stop replaying that footage. The figure's walk. The posture, the deliberate pace. It felt familiar. Too familiar. That night, I dreamed of the generator's hum echoing like a heartbeat under the street, vibrating through the walls of both houses, connecting them somehow. I woke up at 3:07 a.m. to an alert. Motion detected. Karen's porch. The camera showed the same figure standing there again, this time staring directly toward my house. Just standing. Still. Watching. For nearly a full minute. Then turning, stepping back inside, and closing the door. The next morning Morales called. We ran the plates. The van's registered to a Richard Caldwell. Never heard of him. Karen's brother, Morales said. He lives 2 towns over. Has power of attorney for her assets while she's in treatment. So that was it. Her family had come to clean up the mess. Logical, reasonable. But logic didn't erase the way my skin crawled when I thought about that figure standing under her porch light, facing me. Days passed without another sighting. The van didn't return, the lights stayed off, and life moved on. I even started thinking about selling the house, maybe moving somewhere quieter. Then, one afternoon, as I was oiling the generator, I noticed something odd. Muddy footprints along the back fence. Fresh. And too small to belong to Morales or any of the neighbors who occasionally stopped by. I checked the cameras. Nothing. The angle hadn't caught it. Whoever had been there knew exactly where to avoid the lenses. That night, the generator started acting up. It coughed mid-cycle, flickered, and then sputtered back to life. I ran diagnostics, everything was fine. But a faint smell of burnt rubber lingered in the air. When I checked the exhaust vent, I found a small, melted piece of plastic jammed inside. Deliberately inserted. I didn't sleep much after that. The next day, Morales swung by again. He looked tired, concerned. I don't want to alarm you, he said, but Karen's brother never actually visited the property. He's in Florida. He hasn't left the state in months. My mind went blank. Then who? That's what we're trying to figure out. The van was reported stolen the same week she was institutionalized. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The generator's steady hum filled the silence between us. That evening, I decided to end the guessing. If someone was squatting in her house, I'd find out. I waited until dark, then crossed the street again, flashlight in one hand, phone recording in the other. The air felt heavy, the kind of humid stillness that makes even your footsteps sound intrusive. The front door was locked, as always. But when I tried the side gate, it creaked open easily. I slipped around to the back patio, where her old garden had once been, a sad patch of weeds now. Through the glass door, I saw it again, light. Dim, golden, like the flicker of a candle or a lantern. I knocked softly. Hello? This is private property. You shouldn't be here. The light went out. Then came the sound, slow, deliberate footsteps moving across the hardwood floor. My pulse thundered in my ears. Karen, I said without thinking. If that's you, this isn't the way. Silence. Then a voice. Quiet, rasped, like air leaking from a tire. You kept the power running. I froze. Who's there? No answer. Just another step closer to the door. I backed up slowly, keeping the flashlight trained on the glass. The shape that emerged was unmistakable. Thinner, paler, eyes wide and hollow, but her. Karen. She looked at me like she was seeing through me. They turned off my lights, she whispered. I just needed to feel them again. My mouth went dry. Karen, you're supposed to be. I left, she said simply. They couldn't keep me there. Not when everything here was unfinished. The flashlight trembled in my hand. You can't be here. You broke into your own house, Karen. You need help. Her lips curved into something between a smile and a grimace. Help? I was the help. I kept everyone in order. I kept the noise down. You made it all loud again. She pressed her hand against the glass. But I can fix it. That was enough for me. I turned and ran back across the street, dialing Morales as I went. He arrived within minutes, but when we checked the house, she was gone. No lights, no footprints, no trace, just that same faint smell of burnt plastic and diesel lingering in the air. They put out an alert, checked nearby facilities, questioned bus stations. Nothing. She'd vanished. Weeks passed. The seasons shifted. The neighborhood began to forget. People planted flowers again, painted mailboxes, held small get-togethers. But every now and then, late at night, the generator would hiccup. Just once, a small irregular pulse, like something had brushed against it. One evening, I was sitting on the porch when Morales stopped by for the last time. They found her car, he said. Abandoned near a reservoir. No sign of her. I nodded slowly. Maybe that's for the best. He gave me a long look. Keep those cameras up anyway. He left, and I sat there listening to the familiar thrum of the generator. The sky above was dark, heavy with clouds, but my yard was lit bright as day. Across the street, Karen's old house sat empty, windows dark, porch bare. Then, for just a second, I saw it again. A light, faint and flickering, in the upstairs window. I blinked, and it was gone. Maybe it was just a trick of reflection. Or maybe some part of her would never leave Maplewood Estates, still pacing behind those curtains, furious that the world had moved on without her. Either way, I didn't turn the generator off that night. I let it run, steady and unbroken, its echo rolling through the quiet streets like a heartbeat that refused to die. Because after everything she'd done, after all the power she tried to take, the last word, the last hum, the last light still belonged to me.